Hey everybody, it's Mr. McKeever here, and today we're going to talk about the spread of the Enlightenment and really the application of many Enlightenment ideas around Europe. It's only one thing to have good ideas, but unless you actually use them, they don't really serve a purpose. So we'll talk about the spread, we'll talk about the actual uh, use of the Enlightenment ideas and really how they tangibly change Europe. But let's start from the foundation we built last time. The ideas of Locke, Hobbes, Montesquieu, Beccaria, Rousseau, those guys, they're just the beginning. There's going to be new analysis and thought really in every field that exists in European society at this point in time. We have built a foundation of critically analyzing everything, and people are really just going to take that next step as the Enlightenment continues to grow. It is not just a movement that grows in France, though. It's a movement that grows everywhere. Once the ball starts rolling in Paris, every nation is going to jump into this. Every major city, every major metropolitan area becomes a big facet and center of Enlightenment thought. Whether it's Paris or Vienna, London, Berlin, St. Petersburg eventually, these places all become centers of Enlightenment theory, Enlightenment ideas. Philosophers travel. They learn. Salons spread. And this whole notion that human development is positive and that we can improve upon ourselves and on society, all of this becomes really the hallmark of what the Enlightenment is. The search for human growth, and it will just spread to every major area of Europe. When it does that, it's going to face some challenges. Religion was a massive issue during the scientific revolution for many of the early scientists. The Enlightenment is not going to shy away from that confrontation either. But what we see during the Enlightenment is people are going to try to bridge the gap between reason and religion. And it doesn't even matter what religion we're talking about here. We'll have people try to address the situation in each of the major religious entities in Europe, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, and whether it's Judaism. Each of them have a different approach to it, but the notion that there can be a bridge between religion and reason is going to drive a lot of the efforts of the Enlightenment thinkers, because they believe in the notion of toleration. They believe that religious conflict prevents progress. So the more we're willing to work together and really bridge that gap, the better off we will be as a species. So let's look at some of these. Christianity will come under criticism of many Enlightenment ideas. People like Voltaire, who we already talked about. Voltaire finds the Bible to be truly absurd. Like the stories that are proposed out of there, the flood, the story of Adam and Eve, all these things seem to defy natural law and therefore wouldn't make sense. People don't live to be hundreds of years old. All of these problems are things that he brings up, and in his mind, people are going to have problems until they realize what the Bible is. It's a collection of stories that's supposed to promote certain characteristics and attributes that people should follow. And if they realize that the stories are supposed to be allegories for something else, then guess what? It's an incredibly useful tool. But until the church finally believes that and is willing to accept that as reality, it's the ultimate testament of superstition, and he hates it. People like David Hume will also have issues with some of these basic principles of Christianity. The notion that miracles exist, that God just randomly intervenes in the lives of people and makes things happen, is to him absurd. His famous quote is, "The only miracle is that people believe in miracles, because there's no evidence of them. Everything can be explained through logical observation and reason." So we have a lot of critics. People will try to bridge that gap as well, though, but that's a story for a different day. In Judaism, we see people try to develop a more what they viewed as rationalized version of Judaism. Baruch Spinoza wanted Judaism to abandon its more mystical natures of some of the stories and really just function on the very simple, rational aspects of the religion. How it creates a social order that promotes unity in the community. Moses Mendelssohn wanted Judaism to be more welcoming and tolerant. The religion itself wasn't going to survive if it kept the Jewish people on the outskirts of society. They needed to be welcoming to other people. They needed to be integrated into society. Otherwise, anti-Semitism was just going to become more and more prominent in Europe. And he was right on that notion. Anti-Semitism becomes a true epidemic in Europe because Jewish communities are pushed to the fringes of society. So the religions are responding. Sometimes it's an attempt to reform and change themselves into more enlightened ideas. Sometimes it's the creation of new religions entirely, like deism, built off of Newton's clockmaker concept. Deists have an actual ideology now. They believe that the universe is orderly and good. It was created in a perfect machine, and that we can understand that machine and how it works through reason and experimentation. And it's our understanding of this machine which is God's goal for us, because he gave us the potential to do this, to understand it. And thus, doing that, we are fulfilling God's goal for us. So there is a God. It created the universe and wants us to understand it. Trying to bridge that gap between religion and reason. Well, people will also critically analyze how we use our money. The first modern economist comes from this period as well of the Enlightenment, Adam Smith. He is going to design 3 basic laws by which he believes all human interaction really is defined. Particularly when it comes to how we deal with our wallet. And he writes this all down in his book called The Wealth of Nations, the preeminent Bible, if you will, of economists. He believes, 1, that all people are self-interested, that no matter what the action is in the world, that there is some benefit that you do out of it. It doesn't have to be a conscious decision, but it is in our survival instincts to do what is in our best interest. We want to live, to thrive, to improve ourselves. In the same note, competition will have one of 2 intended results for the population. Competition will either drive down prices because people will do it in their best interest, which is to save money and use it for other things, or it will create innovation, inspire something new, because you need to create something better for people to be willing to spend money on it. And this is how progress in society actually happens. It is through competition that we have to improve ourselves, improve our products, and how the world works. And lastly, he comes up with the idea of supply and demand and the relationship between those 2 notions. The more there is of something, the less we want it. We want things that other people don't have, and then we inherently provide value to those things. We are willing to pay more the less number of people who have them. These 3 laws, according to him, were all that was needed for a modern economy to run, because they would work as what he viewed as an invisible hand and moderate the effects of a modern economy. It is the responsibility of government to stay away, to be hands-free, laissez-faire. And in doing so, modern nations and modern economies will be born. So these ideas are coming everywhere. Everyone's jumping into it. Everyone could jump in. It's so easy, a monkey could do it. So how do people use these ideas? Well, those people are the enlightened despots. They are going to be the leaders of various European nations who are going to integrate much of the ideas of people like Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, Beccaria, Smith into how they run their countries. But it's important to remember that these people are not doing it to give up power. They are not acquiescing to a group of people. They're doing it to strengthen their own rule. Because a happy people are people that are less likely to revolt. It's important to remember the precedent that is set during the English Civil War. A European monarch was beheaded by his people. The monarchs of Europe have not forgotten this. They will not forget it. So they need to do what it takes to make sure that their rule is more solidified. If that means doing some things to make the people happier, those happier people are less likely to chop off their own heads. So they're willing to do it. It is the ultimate Machiavellian concept. It is better to be feared than loved, but it is best to be both. And that's the goal of the enlightened monarch. To be both feared and loved. And there are going to be some who are extraordinarily good at it. And what we're going to do now is walk through some of them. First up is going to be Frederick the Great. We've talked about Frederick in the past. Frederick was the guy whose dad was a little bit mean to his BFF and, had him publicly executed. But this has a transformative role in the life of Frederick. He believes that a king should be a father to his people, unlike the father that he had. They should guide the people and serve the people, and that a king should also be the servant to the state. To do this, he is willing to do whatever it takes to improve the life of his people, and it actually will be the first Enlightenment ruler to really embrace the ideas of the scientific revolution and really radically changing the notion of how to create food in Prussia. This serves a variety of purposes. One, it provides food for his armies that are pretty consistently on the march during his rule, but also improves the quality of life of the average citizen, because again, he's the father of his people, and nobody wants their children to starve. He will create a unified code of law for all people to be held by, even himself or ruler. He will abolish torture, except in the fields of torture and murder. So he's at least moving towards the ideas of Beccaria, if not fully embracing them. But he does believe in religious toleration. He comes from Prussia, which used to be part of the Holy Roman Empire. There is no area in Europe that has been more acutely aware of the divisive nature of religion than the Holy Roman Empire. So he ends that concept, that hatred, the animosity between the faiths. But he's just our first enlightened ruler. We also have Charles III. Charles III is the great-grandson of Louis XIV of France. Back when the War of Spanish Succession took place and Louis's grandson, Philip of Anjou, was given control of Spain, his son, Charles, will look to radically change and improve Spain. Spain has been on a downward spiral for a while now. And during the reign of Charles III, Spain does actually make improvements. And it's a period of improvements we call the Bourbon Reforms. It is the formal end of the Spanish Inquisition, so, that should have happened a long time ago, but didn't. It is going to relieve the taxes on the middle class, which is great. When the Spanish Inquisition took place, it drove out the vast majority of the middle class from Spain because they were Jewish or Muslim. And because of that, who was left behind was just overtaxed beyond belief. Charles is going to end that and look to find other opportunities to tax people in order to fund his reforms, and a lot of it will come through imports and exports. He will also remove Jesuit authority from Spain and Mexico. The Jesuits will be driven out of the countries, not because he adamantly hates the Catholic Church or anything. He is a devout Catholic, but he's trying to centralize his government, and the Jesuits he viewed were loyal to the Pope first and King second, and that was an issue for him. So it just became more of a consequence of reality more than any intended hatred or derision against the Jesuit faith. And then also he's going to reform the political structure of the colonies by trying to remove the patronage system that had driven it for the last few hundred years. You don't get to buy a position anymore. You have to be educated. You have to be able to do the position appropriately and responsively of a normal ruler. So these are great for Spain. Spain starts to make a little bit of a comeback. Unfortunately, the rulers after Charles aren't nearly as talented as he is or benevolent, but can't win them all. We see Maria Theresa, another woman that we've talked about in the past. She's the Queen of Austria. She views herself as a mother to her people. She is the perfect foil to Frederick. The two of them have a long-standing rivalry throughout their lives. Frederick views himself as a father to his people. She is the mother to her people. In her mind, the best thing that she could do is prepare a nation for times of trouble by making it efficient. So she is going to cut the fat, if you will. Trim the fat out of the government. Streamline the bureaucracy. Cut down expenses. Make the government make Austria more prepared to deal in times of struggle. Because unfortunately, Austria is kind of just dealing with conflict throughout most of her reign. It's not her fault. She's a tremendous ruler. She loves her people. She makes life better for the peasants. But due to foreign wars, she's kind of dragged into a lot of rough situations. Her son, though, really gets to prosper during this period. Joseph II, who will actually co-rule with Maria for a while, will inherit the monarchy and just radically change Austria and the ideas of the Enlightenment. He is the first and only Enlightenment ruler to completely abolish serfdom. He eliminates any forced labor tax that exists in Austria, something that they call the Robot. He also provides religious toleration to all faiths, including Jews, not Muslims though. Long-standing rivalry between Austria and the Ottoman Empire. But also reforms the judicial system, abolishes torture and the death penalty, and does all of this during his life despite having significant amount of international conflicts to deal with, because he's also around during the time of the French Revolution. And his sister is intimately tied to that situation, she being Marie Antoinette. But that doesn't ignore the last of our rulers too, Catherine of Russia, who in some people's eyes is one of the most flawed enlightened despots, and some people believe one of the most complete enlightened despots, because she is the only self-made enlightened ruler. She did not inherit her throne, she built it herself. And the impact she has is truly remarkable. But hopefully you remember the videos that we watched in class for that. So talk to you guys later and have a great day.